and so far we ain't making a bit of money. I think we need a new business plan or something. Well, my name is Mark Tate. I'm from Conway, Missouri. Glad y'all come to Chuckwagon camp, cowboy camp. Anybody heard of Conway, Missouri? No kidding. There's no reason to stop there unless you need gas. Gas and a little burrito off the road is fine. What do y'all know about a chuck wagon? Have you heard of a chuck wagon? Yeah, most people heard of a chuck wagon. And a lot of them know what a chuck wagon is. Today you'll see restaurants, the Chuckwagon diner, cafe, or on the sign it'll have a picture of a Chuckwagon on it. We'll let the train pass. It's right on time. Give me a cup of coffee. A little bit. The Chuckwagon is an iconic symbol of the American West. No other country in the world has the history that we do here in the United States. It was a short-lived time. The cattle drives were short-lived, 20 years it lasted, and it's something that we should be proud of. And me and my wife had the good fortune last year of going to Belgium. We was invited over there to do some Chuckwagon cooking demonstrations, Dutch oven demonstrations. It was a 3-day event. We had a host family there. We cooked for 3 days, demonstrated for 3 days. And the funny thing is, there's a lot of people in Europe that are in love with American West history. And I think we tend to take it for granted a little bit, what was done, what was accomplished back then. We stayed in Belgium with this family, and they have chuck wagons over there. They recreate, or they restore. They're not original American wagons, but they do a good job of recreating the chuck wagon. Most of them make their own clothing. We don't do that. My wife doesn't make nice clothes. I'm so But there was people there from Germany, France, Holland, and I'm probably missing one country. You know, there are countries over there all mashed together. Here, I live in Conway. It's an hour and a half, or 30 minutes, 30 miles east of Springfield. So we got to travel 3 hours just to get to St. Louis. And 3 hours, they can be in Luxembourg. But they have a big interest in the American West. Anyhow, I'm going to go through about what a chuck wagon is and some of the history of it. The chuck, why chuck? Why did they call it where did chuck come from? Anybody happen to know that? That was what cowboys called food. That was a slang for food, was chuck. Early on, they called it chuck, but it was all the provisions and all their equipment was loaded in a wagon. You see that cabinet in the back didn't exist until 1865. So all the provisions and the cowboys' gear, pots and pans were just thrown loosely in the back of that wagon. And Cookie, who was always the nickname of the Chuckwagon cook, he had time of digging through all that extra paraphernalia to get to the pots and pans and the rice and beans that he needed to cook. But Charles Goodnight, he managed a ranch in the Paladura Canyon. That's about 80 or 100 miles south of Amarillo. Anybody heard of the Paladura Canyon? Yeah. Been there? Yeah. I've been there a couple of times. Beautiful place. Really a neat place. It's the second biggest canyon in the United States. Um, Anybody want to guess what the biggest canyon in the United States is? Grand Canyon. It was so big they called it Grand. It was so big. But anyway, the Palo Duro Canyon is the second biggest, and that just goes to show you what you get when you come in second. Nobody knows who you are. But anyway, Charles Goodnight managed a ranch on Texas, and he's seen the trouble the cook was having, how disorganized it was. The cook was having to do extra work just to be able to start cooking. I'm going to set this coffee down before I spill it. So he had a eureka moment one night at home. This is the story. He's just looking at his wife's cabinet in there, small, a little freestanding kitchen cabinet. You may have seen them in antique stores. They got a possum belly. You open up the flour bins with that little flour sifter built right in there. And he thought, you know, I can build one of them in the back end of a wagon, just make a kitchen cupboard or cabinet there to keep all the food and pots and pans in. And he done it, and it worked. He designed it, the door or the lid. You can see that table there, that folds up and closes it up. It should be watertight, or the water can't get to him. Other ranchers seen that and soon converted their wagons into Chuckwagons. Excuse me. An interesting thing about these wagons, these are farm grain wagons designed for farm use, hauling grain primarily what they're designed. Now they use them for everything. That wagon is a Bain wagon. That's the brand name of it. It was made in Wisconsin. It's 10.5 foot by 38 inches wide, the box, the bed, the square thing that sits over the wheels. This is a Springfield wagon made in Springfield, Missouri. The old buildings are still there. Harry Cooper Supply inhabits some of the old buildings, and you can go around on the west side and see some of the old original cranes and equipment they used to offload rail cars. That wagon is 10 foot 6 inches by 38 inches wide. That's real weird. One made in Wisconsin and one made in Springfield, Missouri, the same size. But really it's not that clear because there was 1,500 wagon manufacturers in the United States that made farm grain wagons. That they all made them 10.5 foot long by 38 inches wide. I've been doing this sort of cooking and wagon stuff for 18 years, and for about the first 9 years, I often wondered, and I asked a lot of people about why they were the same size. Well, that's not a coincidence, and nobody knew. They just said, well, that's just the way it is. And yeah, okay. But finally, I was fortunate enough to have a gentleman move. You know, I've been here for 4 weeks, and that thing still startled me. I really think, I know what it is. It reminds me of when they took my mother-in-law away. And now when I hear it, I think they're bringing her back. Anyway, Clarence Cole is his name. He's gone now, but he moved to the Conway, Missouri area. I got to know him, but he had a couple of wagons. And I tried for 1.5 years to buy a Newton wagon off of him, and I finally got it done. He didn't negotiate very good, so I just had to pay what he wanted. But I asked him, he comes from the Platte River area of Nebraska, and I asked him if he knew anything. He said, well, his grandpa told him, who used to own this Newton wagon, that it was because grain was sold by volume back then, by the bushel. Now it's sold by weight. They grade the grain now, how dry it is, how clean it is, and a lot of other factors. But then it was sold by volume, by the bushel. And he said that every 2 inches in the depth of that box, at 10.5 foot by 38 inches wide, is 1 bushel of grain. So the farmers knew how much grain they had, and whether they were selling it to a neighbor down the road to feed his hogs, or whether they was taking it to the mill to sell to the mill owner. They knew that when they went to the mill owner, they knew how much grain they had. They didn't have to trust the mill owners. They already knew. I thought that was ingenious and really a curiosity why all those manufacturers stuck to that standard. Really, a wagon bed is a unit of measurement. Back to the bushel. How many pecks are in a bushel? Quick. 4. He knew. I picked out an older guy.
That's
I'm
tough.
sorry.
I about forgot that.
Yeah, I about forgot it too.
Yeah.
About all I know about a peck is that Peter Piper's telling. I was picking peppers. Pickled peppers. You ever picked a pepper? Has there ever been a pickled one on the vine? Usually not pickled on the vine. But anyway, that's all about that. And back to the Chuckwagon. So those farm grain wagon was largely changed into Chuckwagons by ranchers and stuff. That panel laying below the wagon, that was part of the grain box. It would have been up on the lower section of that to seal all the grain. Now the cattle drives. You haven't heard about the cattle drives. In 1860, mid-1860s, there was millions upon millions of wild cattle, longhorns, or Texas longhorns, that's where they come from. They was thick as chiggers down there, and just running wild. The Spanish had run them there some couple hundred years before that. The Spanish run them over, just turned them loose, and they really prospered down there. So they were just running them up down there, and they was a nuisance. The people, wasn't enough people down there to eat them. So they just caused a lot of trouble, and they were worth virtually nothing, $1.50 or $2 a head. Well, in New York and the East Coast, it was right after the Civil War, and them people didn't have a lot to eat. But it was a hard thing to get all them cattle to the East Coast or Chicago, Boston, New York City. It was impossible, really, until they built the railroad through Sedalia, Missouri, and Abilene, Kansas, Dodge City, and a lot of other towns up and down the railroad. Then it became possible to get those cattle back east where them people needed it. And that's what started the cattle drives, because in Abilene, say, a cow was worth $30, $40. Down there, they're worthless. So that gives them a lot of incentive to start driving them cattle north. Anybody know, venture to guess how many cattle they would drive? One herd, what would it be? You know, throw a number up there. 10,000. That's higher than most people guess. 2,500 to 4,000 in one herd. And that would take about 20 or 30 cowboys. So where do you get these cowboys? Well, the South was decimated right after the Civil War, and there was a lot of troops that didn't have a job anymore. They had fought for their side, and even the Union and the South. There was a lot of men looking for work, and they heard about work going out to west or South Texas, and they headed that direction with the clothes on their back, usually military clothes that they still had, and their shoes. They wore shoes. The style of shoe was called the brogan. Had a couple of lace, almost looked like a slipper. And the hat they had from the military, and the military issue sack coat. They headed west, and they got there and they could find work. It was everywhere. They had ranch owners and trail bosses looking for men to drive cattle, and so they could get a job. And they didn't have a cowboy hat. Largely what we think of as a cowboy hat didn't come along until late in the 1880s. But John B. Stetson didn't invent that type of hat till 1865 or 1867, and it wasn't widely accepted for a long time. And his hat would have been a flat brimmed hat, round top pump crown. It was called Boss of the Plains. Cowboys didn't have cowboy boots because they couldn't afford those. Those were high dollar stuff back then. Cowboys didn't largely carry guns. I'm talking about real cowboys. They was on horses. They would have to get off and doctor a steer or a cow or something all the time, and then the guns would basically be sticking up in their belly. Now some of them did, but they kept them in the chuck box or the Chuckwagon. They didn't have them on. So belts. They had belts. So you all watched westerns back in the 60s and 70s. Matt Dillon, Buck Taylor, Newly O'Brien. They had belts and nice belt buckles and belt loops. Bonanza, they all had belt loops. But belt loops weren't invented until 1922. They didn't study on that too much. Anyway, okay, they got their cowboys ready, got them ready to go. 15 to 25 years old was the average age of a cowboy. A 25-year-old cowboy was old. They didn't own their own horses. The ranch owner would have a remuda of horses, maybe 50, 60 horses that they'd drive with the cattle to have fresh horses to change out. So they'd wear a horse out in a half a day. So they would head them wild cattle west after they'd got them rounded up. You know them old Texas Longhorns, 6 foot tip to tip on the horn, up to 8 foot. Cow door bulls. And they was ornery, and they was gangly, kind of scrawny, but they was ready to fight at any time. And when getting that many cattle all headed the same direction was quite an undertaking just to get them moving once they got the idea. But at first they wasn't that excited about going to Abilene or nowhere. They wanted to stay where they was at. But it was a hard, old road to hoe for them. It was hot, it was cold, it was snowy, it was rainy, floods in the creeks and the rivers, wild rattlesnakes. They did get bit by a rattlesnake from time to time. Just sleeping out in the open in a bedroom. It was a hard way to go and dangerous, and they got paid $40 per month. The cook got maybe 60 or 70. He was second in command. He had a lot of them cowboys really respected him. But he took care of them. Took care of, they had a boo-boo or something, he'd doctor them. Whatever they needed, the camp cook would try to take care of their needs. The trail boss got 100, 120, but none of them got nothing per month. They didn't get paid until they got the cattle market and got them dudes sold. And man, that was a happy time. One thing, the cowboys, they got their money. Another thing, they knew they didn't want to be no part of cowboying anymore. That took 2 to 4 months. 2 to 4 months, depending on where they was going. And it was hard, and that's why there's an old cowboy that's 25. They very seldom went back to Texas to get involved in another drive. So that's part of the history. And the chuck box, back to the Chuckwagon, cowboy slang for food was what? Chuck. Your name ain't Chuck, is it? Some people think because Charles Goodnight invented it, they called it Chuck, the Chuckwagon or Chuck box. So they took food, they put it in a box, the wooden box that Charles Goodnight. Cowboys called the food chuck, so that box they put it in became the chuck box. And then you put the chuck box in the Chuckwagon, or they did the Chuckwagon, it became the Chuckwagon. So anyway, we got biscuits here and we got some honey. I've got a Dutch oven sitting here. If y'all have a Dutch oven and want to talk about cooking on or something, I'll see you up here. But we got biscuits with honey, and we got habanero honey and regular honey. Compliments of the Zolas Apiary. It's up here at the Frisco barn. They bring us the honey down here. Now, I want y'all to get in line. but wait just a minute. What scares us around here is stampedes. So we've got a way to kind of slow that down a little bit. And how we do that, we don't judge people, but you know who you are. Just ask that the ugly people get in line first. And then that tends to, from the looks of y'all, there might be a stampede anyway. I don't know. So just come on up and we'll give you a biscuit and you can sample part of what the cowboys had to eat. They ate beans in the morning, leftovers the night before, and biscuits, hardtack, and at dinner time, what's called the noontime dinner, they'd have dried fruit, maybe a biscuit in their saddlebags or hardtack. And then at supper time, they'd have beans again and biscuits. There wasn't any fat cowboys. They didn't eat, sometimes they might kill a jackrabbit or a possum or a deer or something, have a little something. So anyway, come on up, ugly people, and get a biscuit.
I'm going to go try a biscuit, and I'll share some more with you guys in a little while.